All right, guys, so today we are going to work on DFP, but with visuals, aka pictures. So we have already discussed DFP, so let's go ahead and fill in our DFP here. We hopefully remember that we can turn a percent into a fraction into a decimal, and then we can turn a decimal into a percent, or go backwards and turn a percent into a decimal. So that's just a review. Make sure it's kind of like a game board. You follow your arrows. You cannot go anywhere other than where the arrows say. So let's go on and practice this first problem here. So it says, what decimal is represented by these shaded pieces in the grid shown below? So specifically, we want a decimal, and they want us to look at the shaded pieces. So shaded is the colored in spaces. So we are going to count those up, and then what I need you to remember is anytime you have a picture, pictures are going to be fractions. So pictures equal fractions. So our problem is asking for a decimal. So I can't just count these up and pop a decimal on it. I'm going to have to start with a fraction. So to start counting, I am going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let me use a different color. So I have 8 here, so that means I'm going to have 16, 24. And then if I keep going, every row has 8, so 32, 40, 48, 56, 64. So when I have a fraction, I have this shaded on top, or whatever my piece is, and then on the bottom is my total. We need to remember that. Total always goes on the bottom. So if I have 64 total pieces, 64 would go on the bottom. And then I need to count my colored pieces, or my shaded. So that would be 8, 16. Sorry, let me do that real quick. So this row would be 8, 16, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. So my top number would be 32. Okay? So now we have discussed how we turn a fraction into a decimal. So again, my answer is not going to be 32.64. We are going to write our DFP. And I have the fraction, so do I have an arrow that turns a fraction into a decimal? I sure do, and that fraction tells me to cowboy and horse. So I need to cowboy and horse this fraction. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that up. My cowboy goes inside, so 32 goes inside, 64 goes outside. Take off your boots and hat and eat 2 donuts, set your dinner table. So I have 4 dinner plates. So in this situation, I don't know my 64s, so I need to make my list. So I have 64, and then I could go to the side and I could start adding up. 64 and 64 gives me 8, so 128. And then you could just keep adding, but I saved us a little time, so I already know our list. So after that, I get 192, 256, and 320. So let's go back to our problem and solve. So can 64 people sit in 3 chairs? No, they cannot. They can also not sit in 32. They can sit in 320. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So 5 gives me 320 perfectly. I subtract, get 0. Can 64 go into 0? No, so we fill in our last dinner plate. So we've talked about all the zeros that we don't need. So my final answer could be 0.50, 0.5, anything like that. which is essentially 1/2. And if you look at our picture here, I have all of this shaded over here. And then if you look on the other side, I have the same picture, just reversed. So if you kind of can look at it from the beginning, you can notice that 1/2 is 0.50. So those are the same thing. All right, let's go to example 2. So it says, what percent is represented by the unshaded region of the image shown below? So on your paper copy, it didn't really shade very well. So if you need to, you can go and shade in those pieces on your paper copy to make it look like mine. All right, so I need us to realize on this one, it said the unshaded. So this is where they're gonna try to trick us. So we want the white pieces, all right? So we just talked about the total always goes on the bottom, and pictures are fractions. So I need to start with my fraction. Even though it wants a percent, I have to start with my fraction first. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So my total is 10. And this time we want the white because it says unshaded. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I really need you to listen right here. 4 pieces is not 4%. So that's going to be our Joe Schmo right now. 4 pieces is not 4%. We have to turn this fraction into a decimal, then we can turn it into a percent. Because if I write out my DFP over here to the side, I do not have an arrow that turns a fraction into a percent. I first have to turn it into a decimal, then I can take that decimal and turn it into a percent. So we have discussed fraction to decimal is cowboy and horse. So I'm gonna have to do division. So my 4 is gonna have to go in the house, 10 outside, boots, hat, 2 donuts, set our dinner table. All right, let's do that division. So 10 people cannot sit in 4 chairs. They can sit in 40 4 times. Gives me 40 perfectly. Bring down my 0, fill in that empty space. So my decimal is 0.40. Okay, but we are still not done because we want a percent. So over here, we just looked at our arrows. We're gonna take that decimal and move it 2 hops backwards. So let's go ahead and do that. Put your pencil on your decimal. I'm gonna move it 2 hops backwards. Gets rid of that, and it is now a percent. So this equals 40%. So again, 4 pieces is not 4%. We turn it into a decimal, then we can turn it into a percent. All right, let's go to example 3. What fraction and decimal is represented by the image? So on this one, it wants a fraction and a decimal. So the first one's gonna be easy because we just discussed pictures equal fractions. So when I fill this in, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my total is 5. And on this one, I have 2 pieces that are shaded in. So those are green. All right. So now I need to turn that into a decimal. And hopefully at this point, we know we need a cowboy and horse to do that. So my 2 is going to go inside. My 5 goes outside. Boots, hat, 2 donuts, set my dinner tables. Make those decimals a little bit bigger. All right, and then we can divide. Can 5 people sit in 2 chairs? Nope, they can sit in 20 4 times. Gives me 20 perfectly. Bring down my 0, fill it in. So my fraction is 2/5 and my decimal is 0.4. So even though they don't have the same numbers, those are still equivalent. All right, next one. It says write out the fraction for the picture below. So this time we have a strip diagram. So let's go ahead and label it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 6 total. So total goes on the bottom, shaded goes on the top. So it wanted a fraction. I have a fraction. I'm good. I do want to take the time to point out, though, that we could technically simplify this. And if we did, I would simplify by 2. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. And the way this works is if I have the same picture down here, but I split it into 3 pieces, so this one has 3, that means I would only shade 1. And that equals the same amount in both pieces. So we have the same amount, but in the top one, I have 2 out of 6, and in the bottom one, I have 1 out of 3. So that's why 2, 6, and 1/3 are equivalent. All right, so this bottom one, number lines. The number lines in these type of problems always confuse people, but if we can think of it like a strip diagram, it really helps. So it says the number line below represents which of the following. So we have this number line and we have this dot here. So it wants us to know, what is this dot pointing to? And our number line doesn't have labels. It starts at 0 and goes to 1 whole. So our answer is going to be somewhere in between there. And if we look at our answer choices, I have a decimal, 2 fractions, and a percent. So we're going to start with the fraction and go from there because pictures are fractions. So the way we're going to do this, we are going to start at 0 and end at 1 whole, okay? These end parts of the number line do not count. We go from 0 to 1. And what I'm going to do is I am going to make a box. So I put a line at the top and then a line at the bottom to connect. So it's starting to kind of look like example number 4. Now, after we make that box, I am then going to go on all those tick marks, so all of those lines, and draw my pieces. So here I have a line, here I have a line, here I have a line. So on all those tick marks, we are going to draw a line. And if you notice, if you look right here, right here, that box is too big because technically there's a line under that circle, so we need to go ahead and fill that in. All right, so now I have pieces. I can write down my total. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my fraction, the total is 8. So now this is the important part. We shade to the dot. So wherever our dot is. So in this problem, my dot is right here. So when I am going to fill in my number line, I'm going to fill in the entire first box and then the entire second box because that's where my dot is. So how many pieces are shaded? 2. So my fraction is 2 over 8. So hopefully, if we are looking at our answer choices, I can get rid of a Joe Schmo here because if my fraction is 2 over 8, I can definitely tell that A is a Joe Schmo because 2 over 8 is not 0.28. We're never going to pick that. So now if I want to pick between B and C, which are already fractions, we could simplify or skip count. So if I'm going to simplify this, I could simplify by 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 8 divided by 2 is 4, which gives me C. We could have also have skip counted, so this would have been 3, 6, 9, 9, 18, 27. That's never going to get us to 2 over 8. C, if I count by 1s on top, 1, 2, and then 4, 8, and that automatically shows me that that equals what I want. And then the percentage, if we needed to solve that, we could have cowboy and horsed. and that would have given me 0.25. And then if I turned that into a decimal, or sorry, a percent, that would have given me 25%, so D is definitely out as well. So C would have been correct because 2/8 is equivalent to 1/4. So big things to remember, pictures are fractions, and then you can go from there.